hate speech. My name is Anna Chalmers. I work for the Southern Africa Litigation Center, SALC. I'm based in Botswana. This morning we are hosting this webinar as part of a hate speech campaign that was mainly influenced by what is happening around the world since last year and more especially this year, particularly post the Trump administration and the changes they have been doing. And it looks like the world has changed as far as hate speech, free speech is concerned. And we have been seeing quite a lot of incidences of hate speech in our region. And we also know that the rise of the anti-gender movement since 3 years ago has now gained more ground. They're holding conferences in Africa. We have read their work, which is mostly linked to influencing governments to draft laws against LGBT, to speak against women's rights. And we have seen the rise of hate speech on social media, people now being able to say and do whatever they like. And the social media giants such as Facebook and Twitter removing the fact-checking and censorship, and we foresee a lot of hate speech that's going to happen. This is why we thought it's a good idea to partner with organizations in the region and talk about the landscapes around hate speech in our countries, the laws and the strategies that we can use to address hate speech. Today we are joined by our executive director at SALC, Anneke, who will be taking us through the presentation around the laws in Malawi that we could possibly use to address hate speech. And then later on, we'll go through some of the advocacy strategies or some of the strategies that have been used in Malawi and that can be used to address hate speech. I am your host for today. I'll be co-hosting with Roger from AdGlow. Roger, introduce yourself, please. My co-host, Roger, just brief intro.
Oh, sorry, the mic was muted. Yeah, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Roger Pili. I am the Executive Director for Art and Global Center Africa AdGlow in Malawi. We are co-hosting this webinar together with NRA and also Angaza. And I would like to welcome everyone to this important and timely webinar, Campaign Against Hate Speech in Malawi. It's timely because hate speech has been on the upsurge in Malawi since the constitutional review case, and also now that we are going towards elections, and some of the issues that are to do with minority or marginalized groups have been picked by politicians as key issues that they think could make them win the votes. So it's high time that we have this conversation, and also it's high time that we co-create or co-develop a strategy that could curb or eradicate hate speech in the social media and also the mainstream media. Joining us this morning, I would like to specially recognize the presence of the Commissioner for Malawi Human Rights Commission, Commissioner Peter Chisi, and also I would like to recognize especially the presence of James Chavula, who is the chair of the Media Task Force for Minority Rights. Yeah, thank you so much, and over to you, Anna.
Great, thank you so much, Roger. It's really good to see the people we have been working with, the people we work with, NRA and Gaza. Thank you so much for agreeing to co-host this very important webinar. Just a quick housekeeping. We are recording this webinar for purposes of having a record and for us to know the goings on in the webinar. While the presentation is going on, please put your questions on the chat, and afterwards would also allow people to unmute you to ask your questions and your concerns. We are also very grateful that the Office of the Human Rights Commission has been able to join. Thank you so much for doing so, and the media, and we know how important the media is around these issues. So thank you so much for joining. So now we will start. Anneke?
Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Thank you. Thank you. I will. It's great to be with all of you today. I'm going to speak a bit about hate speech and some of the legal issues linked to it. I wanted to say this is going to be an hour and a half webinar. We're already about 15 minutes in. So I'm only going to be speaking for half an hour. What I would suggest is that people take notes and perhaps also put any comments you have in the chat box. Although the webinar is short, after the webinar, we will send every participant the slides, so you don't have to take notes of the slides, and we will send an online questionnaire. Once you have filled in the online questionnaire, if you choose to do so, which is like a test, then you will get a certificate in relation to this. Then it would become more of a course than just a webinar. So what I would suggest is, in addition to, we'll send you the PowerPoint, but in addition to that, take note of all the case studies, take note of the comments made by the Malawi Human Rights Commission and anyone else who's speaking, and also by some of the comments made in the chat box, because all of that will then find their way back into the questionnaire at the end of it. So there's going to be sort of a peer learning we all learn from each other, and we put it together, and we can I think it's good to build a body of experts in our region who are actively fighting against hate. Now, webinar is a bit broader than just hate speech, because people always say, yeah, but hate speech is not clear. What is hate speech and those sort of things? We're going to go a bit into that. But I want to just give you this quote from the UN Secretary General, that it's not just about hate speech, because many people say, yes, freedom of speech and hate speech is part of that, which it's not, and we'll go into that. But a big worry is that the more hate there is, the more hate speech there is, the more hate crimes there are, or the more just people become hateful. Eventually, it's a slippery slope that can only increase violence and even lead to genocide. And we've seen this in many countries where there have been genocides. We've seen this in many countries where there have been large-scale killings of specific groups of people and those sort of things. So hate is something that is very serious because if we allow it to escalate, it will be to the detriment of everyone, even if the hate is only expressed against groups that might not be of relevance to us. So no to hate would be our hashtag, and that's also the UN hashtag. And I'm just going to go a bit into some of the issues. Where I say him or her in any of my presentations, that's because it's a quote. So just a disclaimer there. But the main thing is that we're not born to hate people. You're not born filled with hate in your heart. And where people do become hateful, it's important for us to interrogate why people are becoming hateful, and also to try and figure out how that hate that people foster can actually be taken away. It is possible, and I've seen it in my own experiences in South Africa, how people who used to be hateful have become accepting of others that they used to hate. It's a process, and I think it's all about focusing on love and on our similarities and what brings us together, as opposed to focusing on our differences. And differences are wonderful anyway. But a lot of hate is based on misunderstanding. It's based on ignorance. It's based on fear that's based on ignorance. So part of the work is not just about combating hate, it's about combating hate with information. And when we come to strategies, to think through what are some of the misinformation that is out there, and how can we engage in the media and public attention and communities to try and counter the misunderstandings that might be existing in our communities. So the UN specifically have done quite a bit of work around hate speech itself and how and deal with that. But the main thing we're going to be talking about today is not so much necessarily what I'll be talking about is specifically about the laws relating to hate speech and hate crimes. But our broader discussion at the end will be go broader and speak about hate itself and speak about how we try and limit hate that happens in our society. So many people say that. So let's start with the beginning. Hate speech and freedom of speech is not the same thing. And many people claim that it's the same thing, or claim that there's a thin line between it. There's no thin line at all. It is two different things. And that should be our first line. Then, if you take this quote, for example, this says there's a fine line between free speech and hate speech. Free speech encourages debate, while hate speech incites violence. So you're starting to see where the differences are. But if we looked at the UN definition, it actually doesn't limit us just to speech that incites violence. And I'll go a bit into that. So under international human rights law, traditionally hate speech is defined as an incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence. So you're inciting more discrimination in society, and you're inciting violence, which means you want people to commit acts of violence against a particular group. So the UN strategy to deal with hate speech is a bit more broad. So it defines hate speech as any communication in speech, writing, or behavior that attacks or uses discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group of persons, based on whatever ground it might be. So it's more about how you speak to people and how you speak about people. And if that is in a discriminatory way or a way that puts people down, that can be classified as hate speech. If it's just insulting someone, it's not necessarily hate speech. And people can ask any questions they have about that in the chat box. According to the UN, hate speech is when you direct hate speech against specific individuals or group of individuals. So you can't commit hate speech against the state, for example, or an officer of the state. or anything state. Theoretically, you can't also commit hate speech against a type of religion. I can just say, I don't like your religion. So I can't, but once I say, let's kill everyone from a particular religion, that would be hate speech. So, and just to note that Malawi has a specific offense in its penal code, which says that you can't wound a person's religious feelings. So I'm just putting it out there. You might not have known about it, but it's probably the closest you get to hate speech in Malawi's penal code. Anyway, so what is hate speech? Hate speech can take any form, whether it's me talking or memes or cartoons or gestures or a symbol of hate like a swastika or those sort of things. The hate speech is discriminatory or pejorative, which means it's either sort of against a specific group, intolerant, prejudicial, or contemptuous. So it's really just showing hate for a group. And hate speech focuses on people's so-called identity. So it expresses hate against people based on their religion, ethnicity, race, color, gender, disability, health status, sexual orientation, and many other things. So hate speech can take many forms. And it's not just one group that's targeted for hate. I mean, we know, for example, in the same way that there's transphobia and homophobia and sexism in society, there's also xenophobia in society. So there's many different forms of hate. And ideally, if we want to get a society where we all live together peacefully, we can't just focus on one of those forms of hate. We must be against all those forms of hate. So as an example, I can't be against homophobia, but in favor of xenophobia. You know, like we're supposed to be against any form of hate, if you get what I'm saying. And there's lots of those contradictions, and I think it's useful to point out those contradictions. So compare, so hate speech, we said, is discriminatory speech or actions against an individual or group of individuals. Freedom of speech is not really well defined in Malawi's constitution. It's very broad and there aren't limitations to it, really. It says everyone has the right to expression and the media has the right to report and publish as part of access to information. So when you interpret the rights in the Constitution, there's a section in the Constitution that says how you interpret it. So just to say, so when there's like a number on the left-hand side of the screen, that's the section in the Constitution. So section 35 is where your right to freedom of expression is. So if we look at section 11 of the Constitution, it says how you interpret the Constitution. And one of the things is that you can look at international law, and if international law says that hate speech is not included in under the right to freedom of expression, you can take note of that and interpret the Constitution in that line. So when we do take cases to court about hate speech, there's a lot under international law that we can use to actually back up our arguments. And then the Constitution is also based on constitutional principles, and this is in the Constitution itself. And I just want to point out, for example, number E, it says all persons have equal status before the law, and the only justifiable limitations to lawful rights are those necessary to ensure peaceful human interaction. So hate speech is not necessary to ensure peaceful human interaction. So hate speech can never be a justified reason to violate other people's rights, for example. And then an important part under the constitutional principles. It says that every individual have duties towards other individuals. And this includes the duty to respect our fellow human beings without discrimination and to maintain relations aimed at promoting, safeguarding, and reinforcing mutual respect and tolerance. Now, I just want everyone to read this paragraph. I'm going to pause here. I'm focusing on this paragraph because it says that our duty in society is to respect each other, and our duty is actually to foster tolerance. So if you take it a step further, our duty is to act against hate. And it's in the Malawi Constitution. And I think this section is probably the most powerful section that activists in the media and anyone can use against hate. Because it's not citizens' duties to be hateful, it's citizens' duties to stand up against hate. So just keep that in your pocket. Let me move on. So the law in section 41 says that if your rights have been violated, you have the right to access courts or a tribunal you have the right to an effective remedy. So even if the whole world is against you, even if everyone is hateful of someone who's gay or someone who is a trans or that doesn't take away from your right to seek a remedy. And this part of the Constitution says every person. No person is excluded from this. Every person has the right to recognition of the law, which means every person can approach a court or a police station. Doesn't matter who you are, and you have the right to have your problem addressed. So, and then it goes further to say there can't be restrictions on our rights unless they're reasonable and they're recognized by human rights standards. So I'm not going to go into detail about this. But I want to point out that what I've just said is stuff that's in our Constitution. It exists, is not up for debate, or it shouldn't be. But somehow people are reluctant to go against hate. Religious organizations think that it's okay to be hateful of groups that they don't agree with. Media organizations says that anything that tries to limit hate speech counts as media freedom, which isn't true. But for journalists in the room might feel differently. But you see that sometimes people confuse hate speech and freedom of expression. And what happens then is that we normalize hate. We're so used to hate happening and being said to different groups, whether it's to women, whether it's to kids living on the streets, whether it's to sex workers, whether it's to persons with disabilities, whether it's whoever it might be. We're so used to people in society making hateful comments about different groups to a point where we no longer stop people from doing that. Sometimes we even participate in it. And what that does is it makes life worse and worse and worse until violence becomes okay as a form of expressing that hate. And that's what we do not want in our society, and that's what our Constitution in Malawi says it's the duty of all citizens to prevent. So I'm going to speak quickly about how you can deal with hate speech in terms of the law itself in Malawi. I only have 10 minutes left, so I'll be like super quick. So there's a number of offenses and issues, and I'll just go through them very quickly. The first thing is that if someone engages in hate speech against you, depending on how they do it, you could go to court and sue them for damages. If people say stuff in a way that affects your or they use vulgar language, or they affect your reputation or your character or those sort of things. So it's possible to go to court. A probably more effective thing, or even when you go to court, would be to try and interdict people or stop people from continuing. Sometimes it's simple enough as before you even go to court, you go to a lawyer or you go to the Human Rights Commission and you ask them to write a letter to the person who is engaging in hate speech. And that letter can say that kindly refrain from engaging in hate speech, or we will pursue our legal remedies. Keep it vague, but it can be a one-line letter and can be to anyone, even a politician who engaged in hate speech. Dear sir or madam, we've noted you've expressed XYZ. This is not permitted under the Constitution and the law in Malawi. Kindly refrain from doing that, or we will pursue all legal remedies available to us. Yours sincerely, and then the Human Rights Commission or a lawyer signs that. I've seen this work, especially where it's like someone in a community who engages in hate speech. It's called a cease and desist letter. And it's basically, you use the law to tell people to stop what they're doing. And normally that sometimes works to get people to realize that what they're doing is wrong. It's not easy going to court for defamation, and I wouldn't always recommend it because it's a costly exercise because you need a lawyer. And often the money you're going to get out of it is going to be less than the money you paid for the lawyer. But as part of going to court, you have to show that the speeches that were committed were verbal, that they were intended to defame a person, that there was harm as a result of that, and that it impacted on someone's dignity. So civil defamation is more used in the cases where someone is accused of corruption or other types of stuff. It hasn't been used really in cases where someone committed hate speech against a person, but it doesn't mean it can't be. And it might be a way of deterring other people if others are sued for that. And there's other issues one can ask in the case itself. And yeah, sometimes there's some defenses to, and some things you would ask when you launch a civil defamation case. And one of the main things is an apology. The person who defamed people is also able to escape or to be found not guilty and not liable for any damages if they can say what they said was in the public benefit and it was true. But it's never in the public benefit to commit hate speech. So they can never use these sort of defenses really against them. And obviously, a defamatory statement that encourages violence might also then lead you to a criminal issue, which can be reported to the police. And I'm quickly going to go through some of those ones. The one offense that there is in the criminal code is called criminal defamation. That is when you don't want to sue someone in the court, sue someone for damages, but you want to lay a criminal charge against the person for having said something. There are problems with this offense because what we want in society is we want people to start living together in harmony. So if someone is rude against you and then your response is to report them to police, it just escalates and everyone's continuing to fight. So it might not solve your bigger problem. And it often happens that one have to think about why are people making those statements and what is the reason behind it. And then figuring out how to deal with it. So the offenses in the penal code aren't always the best way of dealing with issues around hate. I won't go into detail with that. There's one offense in the penal code that might be useful if someone consistently engages in hate speech, and that's the offense of intimidation, which is if a person by word, attitude, manner of conduct threatens another with injury to his person or reputation, with intent to cause alarm to that person or to cause the it's basically if someone's trying to do something that's actually making stuff worse for everyone in a way that they're trying to threaten people really or act in a threatening way towards persons, you can lay a criminal charge about that. There's an offense called publication of news likely to cause fear and alarm. Now, normally this offense is used against the media, so it's not the offense that one really likes to have in the books. But if someone goes around spreading fear about refugees, for example, I mean, to be honest, no one should be publishing those sort of comments. And if they do, that probably does constitute publication of false news. There's an offense of using insulting language. And I'm just mentioning all of these because sometimes if someone engages in persistent acts of hate speech, having the law come after them could be a way of deterring them and being an example for others. The problem with all of these offenses is that our police don't understand them and are likely to use them in the case of hate speech. But at some point, there should be consequences for hate speech, and we should be engaging the police around how do they ensure that there's consequences for persistent hate speech. There is a Electronic Transactions and Cybersecurity Act, which deals specifically with cyber harassment. It's not really that broad, but it could include acts of hate speech. And then there's also a prohibition of offensive communication. So any person who willfully, if you see sort of the second last bullet point, any person who willfully and repeatedly uses electronic communication to disturb or attempt to disturb the peace or the privacy of a person with no purpose of legitimate communication, they commit a misdemeanor. So I do think some forms of hate speech can actually fall under that section if it's online. So I'm just raising it in case one wants to go after people who perpetrate hate speech. If there are also people who publicly publish false information about specific groups, there's the right to reply. That's also in the Cybersecurity Act. And whoever, so if there's an online platform that engages in hate, the group that they hateful of has the right to go to that online platform, and they have to ask that they be able to reply to those comments. Now, there's much better ways of dealing also with this is sometimes through the mechanisms set up by the social media companies or through dealing with media ombuds or whatever bodies regulate the media. And I think this is what can come up during the strategy discussions. And obviously our journalists can also respond to that. And then I'm almost done. And then there are also specifically sometimes hate escalates into crimes. And in addition to hate speech itself, hate can escalate into the crime of murder, rape, assault, grievous harm, or even genocide. These offenses are all in the Penal Code. Now, interestingly, there's a section in the Criminal Procedure and Evidence Code which says that in all cases, a court can try to promote reconciliation. So even if there was a assault case or insult case or intimidation case, in addition to the court deciding to give a sentence or instead of a sentence, the court can say, okay, it seems like there's just a misunderstanding that these people are harsh towards a specific group because they are misinformed. And the court can then decide on figuring out ways in which to promote reconciliation so that there's a more peaceful society. For example, the court can send a person on sensitization training. Or the court can order someone to do community service in a community where they have been harsh towards that community. So there's, and these are important things to think about because sometimes if someone is hateful and they found guilty of an offense and they get a sentence, say they get a fine. Now they pay the fine. Now they're just going to be more angry against that group because they paid the fine. Some people might be deterred, but it doesn't make them less hateful necessarily. But there must be other things one can combine with the fine or the sentence that actually promotes peacefulness in our society. So, for example, if the person is sent on a sensitization training, that has happened in South Africa, for example, where one of our politicians, Julius Malema, has been found guilty of things in our equality courts, and he's been sent for sensitization training, or he's been ordered to give money to shelters or take part in some sort of things, issue a public apology, all those sort of things. So there's many ways in which one can try and bring people back from where they are. Then there's also what you call a aggravated sentence for hate crime. So if someone commits a crime against anyone and they're doing it because they are hateful against them, then the sentence must be more severe. Now, this is something our magistrates need a lot of training on. I don't think they're really recognizing this, but ideally, in most jurisdictions, if you commit assault, then you get a certain sentence. But if you commit assault because you hate that specific group, then you get a worse sentence. Because hate is so serious. So, for example, there's been given what they call aggravated sentences in cases of hate crimes, or in cases where there's a hostility towards victims, or where the offense is motivated by hostility. So now we're not just talking about, now we're talking about any type of crime. So if someone commits fraud, but they're doing it only against specific groups because of hostility towards those groups, that can also lead to an aggravated sentence. And then just lastly, the Penal Code in Malawi recognizes the crime of genocide. And to explain what it is that genocide is a person commit acts like killing members of a group, and they're committed specifically against groups because they kill people, or they commit harm against certain members of a group, or they inflict conditions which are harmful to a group. And there's a whole range of things that can constitute genocide. But it's basically, and this event, it's the most serious offense in the Penal Code, and it's the most serious offense under international law. What our purpose is to get rid of hate in society so that it doesn't lead to genocide. Because that's the point where people start killing groups of people en masse and causing destruction. And I want to raise something that if we're going to be highlighting hate, we also have to highlight if our own countries are complicit in hate or in genocide. And I think in Malawi, it's important to actually ask questions about the Malawi government's attitude towards Israel when it's very clear that Israel is committing acts of huge genocide in Palestine. So I'm just showing that if you want to start raising consciousness about hate, sometimes you can start with other topics that are more, like while you build it up, if you have to raise different things on different levels, but if you find it difficult to perhaps speak about your own experiences, you can speak about other forms of hate and do advocacy around that. And the main thing is that we must not tolerate intolerance. I love this sentence because it's very confusing. It's like a tongue twist if you say it very fast. Tolerate no intolerance, because tolerance of intolerance is endorsement of intolerance. And I want to raise this in the broader context. The reason why people are saying that there's a thin line between hate speech and freedom of expression is because the people who engage in hate speech have used freedom of expression to justify their right to engage in hate speech. And they've done this on such a big global scale that they've turned it into a thing that if you try and stop them from engaging in hate speech, then they say that they are being vulnerable because you're infringing their right to freedom of expression. Now, that is not true. Hate speech is hate speech, and freedom of expression is freedom of expression, and it's not the same thing. And there's not a third line. People should not be engaging in hate speech ever, and we should never tolerate people who engage in hate speech or hateful conduct or hate crimes. So we need to be aware that internationally, especially in the US, people are starting to define freedom of expression to include the right to express hatred. And we mustn't let those discussions come into our own societies because it's not to our benefit. So just to say, why must our courts really, and there's a lot of work we need to do with our courts on this. At the moment, our courts are not taking hate seriously. They don't realize that it leads to increased harm against peoples. They don't realize that it's a threat to our peace in society, that it creates further fear and it increases, and hate crimes can just escalate and to the point of genocide. And the courts don't deal with it in a way that puts other people off from committing hate crimes or hate speech. And there's many ways in which we can help our courts to take hate more seriously, including training of judges and magistrates, having certain guidelines where the Department of Justice clearly sets out to courts that they need to take hate seriously, and anyone who complains about hate. We can have hate speech specifically in the Penal Code. It's not there at the moment. Well, not expressly. And we can also train judges to take it more seriously. And I will close off to say that we must support free speech and condemn hate speech, and that is it. So that is my presentation. I hope that was clear to everyone. I would like to ask people if they want to raise their hands and give any examples of situations they've experienced as a group, which in Malawi that they think constitute hate speech or hate crimes. It's okay. It's much to digest. If there are no comments, just in the interest of time, I would then hand over to Roger to actually give space to our next set of presenters.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aniki. I would like to invite Commissioner Peter Chisi to give us his presentation on hate speech and hate crime, and also what Malawi Human Rights Commission is doing or has done to address hate speech and also hate crimes. Commissioner Chisi?
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. So I don't have a presentation per se. I'll just speak to the matter in terms of the situation in Malawi, what MHRC has done, and probably also highlight some areas that might require further intervention. So let me appreciate the first presentation, which has actually given a lot of insights into issues of hate speech and some of the misconceptions, especially with regard to issues of freedom of expression and so on and so forth. I entirely agree with most of the observations. As it has been said, yes, in Malawi, we have quite a problem when it comes to hate speech, be it on the political arena, where you look at hate speech in the area of political rivals. There are also issues of hate speech in terms of religious minorities, and then also particularly the issue to do with the sexual minorities, which are subjected to a lot of hate speech. For the Human Rights Commission, of course, we take most of these things to be against general principles of human rights in terms of issues of discrimination, equality, and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, practicality is the challenge, in the sense that people are subjected to hate speech, and there isn't much really practically that happens to protect them, especially sexual minorities, and so on and so forth. What we have done as the Human Rights Commission is basically to speak out against such issues through meetings, through advocacy and lobbying, and particularly through public statements, which we usually publish in the media. So I'm aware that we have done a number of statements condemning hate speech. I think I will give a specific example. There was a time when I think we had issues to do with prosecution of some groups in Malawi, and one prominent politician actually said that such people must be killed. So that actually brought the commission at a time even when the Human Rights Commission did not have a clear position on issues of sexual minorities, but at least we are moved by that hate speech and actually to condemn it. So that was done through a public statement. Beyond that, we have also done the same for other forms of hate speech, particularly within the political arena. And this usually is the case at a time when maybe a country is facing elections, as is the case now. We are going to have general elections in September this year. So already you have also seen increases in hate speeches towards persons with disabilities, towards sexual minorities, and also sometimes towards female politicians, which tend to be undermined and ridiculed through social media, as well as other forms. So I see that as a commission, we have played our part basically by condemning hate speech in all its forms. But I think also what seems to be lacking is to have a solid program or an initiative that takes on board different stakeholders through a process that can actually define what needs to be done. Because in most cases, I think we tend to be reactive. Something happens, you speak to it. When nothing is happening, you are quiet. Again, something comes up another day, you speak out. So the point I'm making is that there is need to work through our structures. There is the Human Rights Commission, for instance, we have the National Peace Commission in Malawi, we have the judiciary, we have the police, we have parliament. My view is that there is need to actually take hate speech on the national agenda and call upon the relevant institutions to play their role, not just spontaneously when something has happened, but this is something that needs to be built into a national program. And again, I like the analysis that was made earlier, that sometimes it's not just about a particular group. The example that I think the previous presenter gave about the Malawi government attitude towards Israel and so on and so forth. Sometimes some groups tend to be isolated, and that isolation can sometimes even increase instances of hate speech towards that group. But as we know it, hate speech does not choose. So there are so many categories of people that are victims of hate speech. You have given examples of refugees and asylum seekers, religious minorities, even tribal groupings across the nation. Sometimes we also see some of them being targeted with hate speech. So my view is that we need proper programming, which actually isolates issues of hate speech and actually calls upon stakeholders to come up with a clear roadmap in terms of how to address it, so that we promote coexistence, we promote nationalism, and so on and so forth. I think let me leave it there. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. If we have questions, we can write them in the chat. I've got one question, actually, whether it should go to you, Commissioner, or Aneki. Last year, we saw the government advancing a policy whereby they said that all refugees should go back to the camp, to Nzaleka. And as much as the intention was good, and also the statement was clear that they were just advancing or enforcing the government policy, but we saw people in different districts and communities inciting violence against immigrants, especially those that have the refugee status, doing business in different communities. And they rooted their mechanized, and also some of them were beaten and chased away from the communities, in which like the statement emanated from the minister, and the result was hate crimes, in which I could define that as hate crime. I don't know how best could one, probably the Human Rights Commission, and also the people that are advancing tolerance could do, or what legal instruments that are there that could be able that could be helpful to address such kind of hate crimes, especially coming from a government policy that probably I don't know how and where and its intention, but what is it that could be done? Aniki or Peter?
There's a hand up, Roger. Do you think, because Davy, are you answering the question? Because that would be great, because it was a really hard question. You're asking another question.
Actually, it's another question, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. So to answer Roger's question, I think this is a hard one, because you are right that when the government created a policy that said everyone must now go to a refugee camp, the way in which it communicated that policy almost sent the message that it's okay to discriminate against people who are refugees. Now, that is wrong, and what the minister ought to have done is, and obviously one would want to challenge that policy because it was dodgy, but I think this is where institutions like the Human Rights Commission are probably best to address it, because you can't take the minister to court, because what he said was in hate speech. What he said was enforcing a government policy. The government policy is discriminatory, and there one would have to go to court to declare it discriminatory, but the human rights can also say that they think the policy was discriminatory. I think what is important is that once a government creates a discriminatory policy, and that whilst that policy is still in place, it's important for everyone else to come out and say that that doesn't mean that you can disregard the rights of anyone who is affected by that policy, and that citizens cannot take the law into their own hands. So I think it was probably on all of us to say more about it, not just to condemn it, but to warn people, to explain that it's limited to a specific situation carried out by government that will be challenged in court, but no one else should be taking this as meaning that they have the right to disrespect anyone's rights. So I'm not answering your question, Roger. We'll hand it over to Peter.
All right. Thank you so much. And this is a very important question. Indeed, I like the analogy whereby government started with a policy, and the policy did not actually amount to hate speech per se. But once that policy was being implemented, that's when we also saw hate speech coming in. In other words, Malawi has seen the policy of putting refugees in the camps for quite a long time. But of course, because of the difficult living conditions in the camps, a number of refugees and asylum seekers have moved out and integrated into local communities. Some of them engaging in employment, but most of them also engaging in a small-scale business. what we saw happening after this policy was implemented is that other stakeholders now, including some community members, are coming in to speak against refugees and asylum seekers. And this is where hate speech was now coming up. These people have come to grab our businesses. These people are grabbing our land, and so on and so forth. And then let me also report here that we even had a situation where some association of small-scale businessmen were up in arms and declaring that they were going to take the law into their own hands. They were going to chase all refugees and asylum seekers from the urban areas and so on and so forth. And as MHRC, we did quite some useful intervention because we somehow mediated over this matter. We had several meetings with them where we tried to explain to them and understand the benefits of the refugee community and so on and so forth. Thank God at the end of the day, the violence that was being threatened did not take place. And thank God, I think as of now, we still have some populations that have gone back into the communities, are residing in the urban areas and so on and so forth. And I think we are not seeing government speaking up much now to actually invoke that policy against for everyone to go to the camp. Of course, our position has been very clear as a commission. There is no life at the camp. And we think that it doesn't make sense for people to be living in the camp. But our biggest threat was now when some people said they are going to take the law into their own hands. And we did an intervention, I think, which was well and very effective, but we had a very precarious situation. So my final view on this one is, okay, how do you look at sources of hate speech? So sometimes it can emanate from government decisions, government policies, and so on and so forth. And then who is involved in actually propagating that hate speech? It can be a number of stakeholders. In our case, we even saw some government officials speaking out to say anyone who is against the government policy does not love Malawi. So that also, in my view, was some element of hate speech in the sense that if you don't agree with us, then you're not one of us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Commissioner. Before you go, there's also a question in the chat coming from James Chavula. He's asking, he said in your talk, you indicated that MHRC was able to speak against hate speech by a prominent politician even before the commission had a clear position on hate speech. What is the Commission's official position on hate crimes, and how far can it go to affirm the rights of persons affected by hate rhetoric? That's a question coming from James Chavula. Yeah, Commissioner?
Okay, I think maybe my brother James might not have heard me correctly, or else I was not very clear myself when speaking to that. So
right.
the commission has a very clear position on hate speech. The position is that hate speech is a violation of human rights and it should be condemned in all its sense. But I think what I was referring to was the Commission's general position on issues of sexual minority rights, whereby I think at that time the Commission did not take a position on the issue of sexual minority rights, because I think I was speaking to that with reference to a number of UN recommendations on violence against sexual minority rights and so on and so forth. So that has changed recently, but at that time, the position of the Commission was that there was no position. Thank you.
Yeah,
Hi, Roger.
okay, sorry.
There's another
Hi.
question. Yeah, there's another question on the chat. Sorry.
All right, thank you so much, Anna. Yeah, I think the question is also going to the Commissioner. Let me. Okay, it says, at what time or when are we going to introduce a law that will address hate speech?
So I think that one Okay, it's not within our mandate as MHRC, but what can we learn from other countries that have laws and policies clearly speaking on hate speech? We can actually advocate for the enactment of the law, either through the law commission, which we can write. They can come up with a special law commission because they're the ones are responsible for proposing legislation. Another way is to work directly through the Ministry of Justice. I think for very, very briefly, the position is, should Malawi come up with a legislation on hate speech? The answer is yes. Then how do we do it? So there are a number of avenues that can be undertaken. And we have to weigh whether through a private member's motion, whether it should go through the Minister of Justice, whether it should go to the Law Commission. But that would require some further scrutiny by stakeholders to say what is the correct path. But definitely, we need this law on hate speech in Malawi. The only question is which route, because there are many avenues that you can take. Some can be shorter, others can be long, others can be more complicated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Aneki said, yes, there is a law that can be used against hate speech. I think she has listed all the frameworks in the chat. Probably you could want to take a look at that. And there's a comment from Caleb Muchungu. He said a lot of these issues that emanate from a debate like this is also ignorance by the population. My question, is there a Chichewa version of the Constitution? If so, can someone send me a copy? I think there is a Chichewa version of the Constitution. I can fish out one and send you, Caleb. Yeah, so I would like to invite, Davy had a hand. Davy, please, could you take the floor and ask your question?
Thank you so much, Mr. Roger, for acknowledging, and we go to the moderators as well. I think for me, my question, Mr. Commissioner, was to understand, coming from a perspective of an out and proud gay man, I would want to know what are the on-ground operations that are there that are addressing hate speech in regards of addressing the LGBTIQ plus community, in as much as the Commission is overstand. Thank you.
Commissioner, could you please address David's question?
Can he come again, or maybe you can summarize the question? It was not very clear to me.
David, right. Could you come again?
Yes, I hope I'm audible enough. I would just want to know from Commissioner, what are the ongoing programs on the ground that are operational in terms of addressing hate speech pertaining the LGBTIQ plus community members on ground? I would want to know, as a community member, what are the programs that are being run on the ground at the moment? Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you. So I would think that the first initiative is for us to do a change in terms of people's attitudes and perceptions. And this is being addressed through media interventions. So even issues of trainings on the media are among those that are aimed at issues of positive reporting. I'm speaking not only with the reference to LGBT community, but also to with the refugee and asylum seekers community. Because what we noted was that due to a number of negative attitudes in the communities and also issues of misinformation, there is need for people to have the right information. So for instance, I think with regard to the issues of refugees and asylum seekers, most people, the message they have is incorrect about the reason why these people are in our country, and even some of the benefits that you can actually get by actually accommodating these people. With regard to issues of sexual minority rights or LGBTQ+, what we have also noted is there are issues of misinformation and miscommunication about issues in courts and so on and so forth. And again, through that, our view has been that we need to have some media interventions. I'll give an example that in issues of sexual orientation in Malawi are largely represented as promoting same-sex marriages. And the element of same-sex marriages is the one actually that attracts a lot of negative reactions from members of the religious community and so on and so forth. So we as MHRC and other stakeholders as well, we have that responsibility of ensuring that people have the right message, that people should be able to see the differences in the specific terms that are being used. So for instance, issues of sexual orientation are not necessarily the same as issues of same-sex marriages, although they could be related. But opponents of some of these views directly choose and use wrong terms to actually ignite hatred. So these are some of the interventions that we're taking in terms of trying to promote positive reporting in the media and also trying to promote positive attitudes of coexistence. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Commissioner Peter Chisi, for that. I would like to call James Chafula, who is the chair of the Minority Task Force, the Media Minority Task Force, to also take the floor. James?
Good morning, Roger, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to say something about what we're discussing here. And I commend the previous speakers for doing a good job on the laws and the environment in which hate speech tends to occur in our country. I'll speak briefly about our media context and how. Hello? Okay.
Yes, carry on.
Yeah, I'll speak briefly about our media context and how we look at hate speech. Then I'll also speak how this issue is happening beyond the regulated media. So in the country, our media is self-regulated, and that means that we opted for an environment where we regulate each other as media professionals instead of surrendering to state control, because we felt that if we had to take that path, then the state would have too much power and even use media control as a way of restricting freedom of expression as well as free press. So in our self-regulation mode, the Media Council of Malawi is the main regulator, and that is owned and sponsored by the owners of media houses, various media houses. And apart from just safeguarding their business interests, these media organizations that contribute to the Media Council are also saying they have a responsibility to protect the rights of the people that we work with, that includes the people who consume our media content. So the Media Council of Malawi has got a code of conduct that each and every journalist is supposed to abide by. And this code of ethics is supposed to be taught in every journalism school. And there's a whole process of complaint handling that it has to follow, and it's such a restrictive, a strict process that it states the number of days that a complaint has to take at each stage until it gets to its final conclusion. And even after that, the people that are complaining against the media conduct can take the matter to court as a way of appeal. So in their wisdom, the framers of our media code of conduct acknowledged that the media plays a crucial role in every democratic state as as a watchdog, and that they also noted that every journalist has a duty to inform the public accurately and to comment fairly on matters of public concern, and that's without fear or favor or using insulting language. Then they also recognize that journalists have a duty to maintain the highest possible standards and ethical considerations, bearing in mind that they have so much power to influence the way people think and to set the agenda. So I'm particularly, when we talk about hate speech, it's something that is not tolerated by our code of ethics. And if you look at the section, article 3.11 of the Media Code of Ethics, it actually outlaws journalists from identifying victims of sexual assault or publishing any material likely to contribute to such identifications. Similarly, it also obligates journalists to avoid the prejudicial and pejorative reference to a person's race, color, ethnic origin, religion, sex, sexual orientation, and any physical or mental illness or disability, unless such reference is relevant to the story. However, the question is, are these articles, are they enforced? Because sometimes we see them happening both in our print and the electronic media. So the issue that comes to mind is, I think the media is just a subset of our society. What Malawians tolerate is actually, I mean, the way our nation enforces laws and policies that have to do with hate speech actually tells us what we tolerate as society. And if you look at our media context, we are in such a context where when it comes to issues like LGBTQ rights, the media is clearly divided between some who feel these are human beings like any other, therefore their rights have to be protected, they have to enjoy their rights and let them be. Others who are on the other side, pointing fingers, blaming them, saying, no, this is against our culture, this is not. So when you see the majority keeping mum or quiet about hate speech, it shows you what they tolerate. And in our media, I think we are setting a dangerous tone where what seems to matter is the perception of the majority, not the right way of doing things. And this has partly contributed to a movement that's underway to make sure that possibly self-regulation has failed for our media. And so we should go for a semi-state controlled approach. And the Media Council is working on a law that will give the state, that seeks to give the state some leeway to regulate the media in conjunction with them. And this is kind of admitting that while everything, while they have progressive articles written in the Code of Ethics that they're supposed to enforce, they have failed to enforce it, and there seems to be no commitment for the media practitioners to submit to this regulation. I think in my short career, I think I first practiced journalism in 2006. I've only seen one or two people being summoned by the Media Council Complex Handling Committee, and that does not speak well for a media for a media culture where you see you see some marks of hate speech happening almost every week. I think the Media Council of Malawi has a big job to make sure that the people that, I mean, the journalists that violate the rules and laws to do with the hate speech are actually penalized. And in so doing, it will help it will help deter other would-be offenders. But where they are not taking any actions against offenders, it creates a climate where everyone feels it's right to say some things that they should not be saying in a place where equality matters. And like we're struggling in our self-regulated media context. On the other side, the social media, now that's where the big problem, I think, now lies. And because the mass media, which is supposed to regulate itself, is not doing that. There seems to be a narrow divide between the way we are practicing journalism and the way our friends online are conducting themselves. So while the Malawi Communications Regulatory Authority has the Electronic Transactions and Cyber Security Act to use against the people that are perpetrating hate crimes online, we don't seem to see the laws work. The laws are not working against the people that are doing it. And so that the same way it's happening in the mass media, on the social media, the laxity to apply that law, to enforce that law, is giving people a false impression that they can say anything against anyone and get away with it. So like Enek said in that interesting slide, we have tolerated things that we shouldn't tolerate. And so this has become an endorsement of the hate crimes that happen in plain sight. Maybe this has to do with also the way we handle our laws. Our laws are written in beautiful English, and usually that is only friendly to people that come from legal background, the lawyers and their colleagues on that side. So in a country where we're talking about 35% of people, of the population being illiterate, and then we're saying they cannot read and write. I mean, you expect a bigger section of that population to be unable to understand things that are written in English. And even a much bigger section of that population to have the capacity to understand English the way our friends in the legal profession use it. So maybe we should start with simplifying the laws, bring them in the language that people understand, and putting them in the formats that will make sense even to people who can't read and write. And in the legal profession, they've got the maxim that ignorance is not an excuse for committing a crime, but our goal should not be to fill our prisons with people that are perpetrating hate crime. It should be to reduce that number and maybe raising awareness about this. So it should begin with the making the laws accessible to everyone, even those who cannot read or write. And then on the media side, the code of ethics says it has to be taught in every journalism school, but if you conduct a fair assessment, like Lodge and I tried to do at some meeting, you find that we have journalists that do not seem to have touched the code of ethics. And it's a small booklet, about 20 pages. People that don't seem to have read that one. And so maybe we also need to train journalists mostly to understand why hate speech should not be tolerated in a functioning democracy like ours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, James. You have raised a lot of important issues there, but I've got only one question before you go. You said that now the Media Council is going towards the semi-state controlled, or it's restructuring the way it conducts its business. First and foremost, currently, who moves the Media Council? Is it the victim or the victimized group, or it moves by its own accord? And how would this semi-state control or controlled framework look like?
Okay, thanks, Roger. According to the Code of Ethics, and that's part 2, where it talks about the disciplinary action resulting from professional misconduct. I mean, that's chapter 6. It's the complainant who has to move the media council to act. And so it's pretty much like the way the court works. For the court to start to start handling a case or a dispute, someone has to complain, and they have to clearly indicate which section of the wrong read or the short read they find to be offensive and why. So when processing that complaint, you have to send it to the executive director of the council, who has to forward it to the disciplinary committee within 7 days. And the whole process, I think, is supposed to be concluded within 21 days. So I think it's also one area where some people have complained, because I think where systems are functioning, the media council should be able to spot the don'ts and take the favorable action. Like transgressions should not be neglected or should not be allowed to pass because the watchdog is fast asleep. The watchdog has to detect it and act. And so it's one of the justifications that have been raised for the transition to a semi-state-controlled mode. And what does that look like? This looks like the way maybe medical practitioners are regulated, but it's slightly a bit relaxed. So for one to become a journalist, you will not become a journalist because you failed to get a job elsewhere. You will become a journalist because you have undergone some training that is stipulated, and you have to pass the minimum yardstick. The same way you can't become a doctor if you don't pass.
Thank you so much, James.
According to the media
so much,
council, we expect this to reduce the number of journalists who are simply not adequately trained or skilled to become journalists. And you agree with me that in Malawi, we have people that are supposed to be doing something else, but have ended up in journalism because maybe the profession has become more lucrative, or it has become, it's too open to anyone. So also in the semi-state controlled mode, the state will have some power even to hold the media council to account for not acting on cases that it should have acted. And where cases have not been handled fairly, the state and the media council can work together to make sure that no media house and no journalist is above the law. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, James. Okay, briefly, I would like to give the floor to Godfrey Kambewa and Eric Sambisa to share some of the things that the Angaza and NRI are doing to address hate crimes and also hate speech to the constituents that they are working with. First, Eric, and then Godfrey. If we have any question, we can write it in the chat or we can raise our hand.
All right, thank you so much, Roger, for this opportunity and for organizing this webinar. I think it's very important that we should have this conversation. After the court case, and now that we are going into elections in Malawi, the media, especially social media, uses the community to instigate violence and to promote hate speech. So it's really an important conversation to have now. As an organization, as LGBTI organization in Malawi, we are doing several interventions to counter hate speech. One of them is doing some legal clinics where we bring our community members just to educate them, to give them information about any piece of legislation that they can use when they encounter hate speech. there are some pieces of legislation that we can use whenever we are violated through the media, through internet, and that's another way that we are doing to give information to our community members. Not only that, through other support from the other foundation, we were able to engage the Legal Affairs Committee of Parliament to give them information about the LGBTI community and also to make them allies so that whenever they are doing campaigns and all that, they should avoid instigating hate speech towards our community. So I think that was really successful. The committee also was able to commit that they are going to do something and reach out to other committees in the parliament to give them information about the LGBT. Just like several speakers on this webinar have said that people do hate just because of ignorance. So we are really trying to give information to different stakeholders so that they should know who are the LGBT and they should also help us in dealing with hate crimes towards LGBTI community. Yeah. So another a stakeholder that is very difficult to work with these social media influencers. Even the previous speaker have already said it, that these days anyone can become an influencer, and it's difficult to engage with such people because they don't really have any training. So we are also planning to engage social media influencers to give them information about LGBT so that they shouldn't be continue promoting hate. I know as we are going towards election, these are the kind of the other stakeholder that we should engage so that we should minimize issues of hate speech through various social media platforms. I think I'll leave it there. Those are some of the intervention that we are doing in Malawi. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. Briefly, Godfrey.
Unfortunately, Godfrey is not available right now, so I will speak on his behalf. It's Alexander Nkonchera, speaking on behalf of Angaza Foundation. So as Angaza Foundation, currently we have firstly embarked on research navigating the pros and cons of digital identity so that we're also able to protect, to understand how to protect individuals in terms of instances where they've been attacked with hate speeches online, in terms of how to track the perpetrators and how can they respond and react in terms of being victims of hate speech and cyberbullying. And in addition to that, we also have a reporting link on our website under our human rights program, which directs survivors or people who have been affected by, who have experienced hate speech to report and using the link, and it enables us to document all cases that we have experienced underway. And also currently we conduct community sensitization and awareness to educate the community on issues of human rights and hate speech, seeing that it's usually normalized and casualized in the country, and others may be victims of hate speech and may just not realize that they have experienced it. So we talk to them on issues of hate, we introduce issues of hate speech. How can they recognize that they're being violated in terms of speech, and how do they respond to that so that they're aware with regards to this issue. And we also provide psychosocial support for survivors who have experienced GBV through hate speech. So we link them to our other implementing partners in the districts of implementation, such as psychosocial counselors from BELA, the Gender Office, and Social Fair Office. Also, currently, I would like to apologize for the little participation from the ET. Is currently also attending a constitutional review of the country, so hence his unavailability. Yeah, otherwise, that's all. That's all we're doing as Angaza, to sum up in a nutshell. Thanks and over.
Thank you so much, Alex. Pakama Shiri writes in the chat, thank you for the insightful presentations from all speakers. I can also find similarities with Malawi Human Rights Commission as a member of Eswatini National Human Rights Institution, that we often do not have specific programs towards hate speech. I would be interested to know if there could be some recommended best practices that can be specifically undertaken by our national human rights institutions to address hate speech changes against certain, or hate speech challenges against certain groups. Thank you so much, Pakama. I would like to hand over the floor to Anna to take us through the closing of the webinar. We are way past our closing time. Anna?
Thank you so much, Roger. Thank you at Glow for co-hosting this, Angaza and NRA. Thank you so much for organizing this. Like Anna said in her introduction, a link to a questionnaire kind of test would follow. Please make sure you participate in the survey. Following that, you will get a certificate. Also, feel free to make recommendations to AdGlow if you want more webinars of this kind, follow-up actions, and which topics you'd like to be focused on. This is a campaign that's going on for the whole year. Participate in more webinars, and thank you very much for joining us. Any last thought, Anneke?
Thank you, everyone. It was lovely seeing you all.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, and bye.
Thank you. Bye.